Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Heidi Horsley, and I'm here today with my mom and co-host, Dr. Gloria Horsley. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Heidi. Well, we want to remind everybody that we're in different areas. I'm in California and Heidi's in New York. And we also want to remind you that these shows are brought to you in partnership with the Compassionate Friends.
Today we are going to be interviewing one of those angels on this earth, and her name is Gabrielle Doucet. And Mom, we're going to be talking about reducing stress after loss. Gabrielle Doucet works with others who have lost loved ones to suicide. Her son died by suicide just 5 years ago. She helps people manage their recovery, improve their health, and reduce stress through the mind-body connection. And she is the author of Let Go and Let Love, Survivors of Suicide Loss Healing Handbook. Welcome to the show, Gabrielle.
Well, I can say that, say about 30 years ago, no one would even admit to having a loved one or someone in their family or life having taken, their own life. But that stigmatism has barely moved on the Richter scale. It is very difficult to say the word. And when I lost my son, Drew, to that, I realized exactly what that felt like. So as an organization, trying to help people that have, survivors of suicide loss, they're often stymied by what we bring to the table or don't bring to the table, as it were. We're traumatized in ways that we don't even know how to speak of it because the rest of the world doesn't like to speak of it. So we're isolated. We're very isolated. I saw very little of things about Drew that worried us.
Okay.
Drew was, you do see the gamut, all the way from people who do eventually take their life, who have struggled for many, many years with depression and a lot of other emotional upheavals that have come to the surface very early, and they receive attention and they work very hard at it. It's just that their pain is too much. In the case of Drew, he was at the other end of the scale, in which he hid everything. So our ability to see past that was, or into where he might have been experiencing pain, was very difficult. I mean, he was like perfect from the outside, just perfect. He had everything he wanted, and he was achieving immense things. Every once in a while, I would feel this barrier to expressing that I would worry perhaps and say, is everything okay? Absolutely everything is perfect, Mom. My daughter does wear everything on her sleeve and very expressive, whereas Drew did not. And I do believe, I've come to believe in coming this journey that I have about surviving suicide loss in my family, someone so dear to me, is that we cannot fix people, but what we can do is we can leave this door wide open and express ourselves as being open to hearing anything. I don't know what else we can do with our children but that, because you can't take the top of their head off and go in there and look around. It's impossible. You have to work with them and just give them as much support and love as you can and be very open to what they need to express themselves with, whether they will or not.
How have you gotten to the point where you're helping people?
The journey that I was taking was certainly not going to be the best for me if I continued. After Drew took his life, you really do live in a terrible place of grief. You are blindsided, or your grief is so deep and it's so personal that you really don't see that you have choices. I think that was the first thing that I noticed, is I felt like I had lost all my options. And I'm sure many people that go through loss of all kinds, tragic loss of any kind, you kind of feel like this has all been put on you and it's come to you, and that you are indeed a victim of your own, and you don't have choices. My first step in the right direction was in sitting up and saying, why have I lost choices? I can't believe that I truly have. And when I say choices, I mean, I can do something for myself, can't I? I mean, I have lost Drew. However, I am not dead. I haven't lost myself, but I feel like I have lost, choices around myself. And part of that comes from the external exposure that you are in. Everybody's grieving around you, and then everybody goes on about their business, and you are left with this shell that you're living in, and you can choose to stay in that shell, and quite frankly, many do, as I'm sure you have met them, is that being in the place where you don't have to do anything about it is far easier a choice and more comfortable with what you know, which is pain and grief, than to come out and realize that there's something you can do about it. So that's the turning point for me, was realizing I had not lost my choices. And if I did not have to be without choices, and that means I can make a step forward to bring myself into a better healing. As a background in nursing, I realized my body was suffering. I was not well. I was going to stay unwell unless I got better. And getting better meant I can do something about it. So it was positive choice.
Now, when did you, about how far would you say you were into the grief journey when you made that decision?
I have to, and certainly it will be different for everyone, but I have to say I was a couple of months into it, maybe 3 to 4 months, in which I felt like everyone's gone back to what they do, and I have not. And I was very lonely there. My isolation was profound, certainly because I couldn't talk about it. I mean, who wants to speak about death by their own hand? Nobody does. So the isolation really reached a peak at about 3 to 4 months.
You want to shake the world and say, world, don't you realize my life has been turned upside down? Why is everybody going on business as usual?
Right, exactly. And I think I wrote in the book, bills are being paid, diapers are being changed, and I'm in extreme pain. Why aren't you paying attention to me? And that's exactly right, what you're saying. You really want people to keep you there. It's much more comfortable staying in a tough place sometimes. But they can't, and they don't. So I didn't think that I could either.
What was your first step? Do you remember? What was the first thing you did, or some of the first?
The first thing I did was to start using some of the tools that, ironically, I had designed. Being a person, a healer and a consultant for people who are ill and have a lot of pain from, say, chronic and acute care illnesses. So I had created kind of a program for them, and that's really what saved me, because I turned to that program and I said to myself, I'm either going to hit the ground running or I'm going to be a splat. I had to start walking the talk, and it began with intention. And so by taking on intention in my own life, I found that I could create these small, minuscule goals that would take that first foot forward into some sort of a light on the pathway. Not the whole pathway. I could not see the whole pathway. I didn't know how to get totally out of the hole, but it felt like that first knot on the rope to kind of pull me forward. A very early on intention for many would be, this morning I'm going to get up and I'm actually going to get myself out of the house. I'm going to find a place to go that is, if I needed to be private, fine, but I'm going to get myself out of the house. And that first step of moving you out of an area that you have been dwelling in seems to be a whole change in your demeanor and your blood pressure and your pulse. Everything changes for the better when you move forward with a small, minuscule intention. You find, I can do that, and it's measurable. Either you got out of the house or you didn't get out of the house. And if you got out of the house, and make that check mark and say, did it. I did it. It's measurable. And maybe tomorrow I'll get out in the house again, and then maybe next week I'll get out a couple of times during the day. So that intention is built personally for yourself. Nobody created it for you. You decide what would help you take that first step that will be measurable and positive, and it must be positive because every single intention has to have a simple statement that's positive for yourself. And if you take that positive desire that you're working on, but maybe you have not yet worked it out, and it involves your thoughts, your emotional input, not your muscles, you suddenly feel, I've made a change. I've made an improvement, and I've measured it, and it's there.
I like this, Gabrielle. And my mom and I always say, even if you don't buy into this, it will still work.
Right.
You don't
Yeah.
have to believe it for it to work. Do it, and then look, and then check in with yourself about how you feel, because you're going to feel better.
Absolutely. I mean, the old adage, remember, fake it until you make it.
Yes.
I can't tell you the number of times I said, I'm not going to say this won't work, but you know what? I'm not convinced. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to do it. And the outcome is the outcome, but I'm doing it. And that led from one thing to the next. I mean, at one point, I changed from not smiling at all, which had been my whole life of smiling, to smiling for the first time.
The research shows that if you smile, it tells your brain that you're feeling good, you're in a positive state, and it'll change the way that you feel. So even the act of smiling changes the way that we feel. Sometimes we feel like we have to feel good to smile. Do the opposite. Smile first, and you will feel good.
That smiling's amazing. I was furious at my husband yesterday, and rather than I was walking up the stairs, and I thought, I'm going to smile. And when I got up there, I was able to say, I'm sorry. Let's move on. But you've got some other wonderful tools here now. I want to mention a couple, and you can expand on. But the deep breathing, important. So we're talking about health, and then gratitude and meditation and manifest what you think.
Manifesting what you think. Basically, it's known as the law of attraction. And what this is about is that it says what we think is what we get. And the words that we use are incredibly important. So the more we talk negatively about ourselves or our situation, the more we bring that to you. That's the principle. And a lot of people don't really abide by that. They struggle with it. But philosophically, I will find that if I always say the words I do, I can, I am, I have been, I have, I'm never showing a lack of. So by manifesting, I get manifestation of what I want when I use the words, the positive words that take me there.
What we focus on grows. So you're focusing, like you said, you're thinking and focusing on positive things, and so you're starting to see them more and recognize them more and pay attention to them more.
Because in my world, I believe that the universe always wants to give you what you want. And if you're telling them all the time that I want things that make me unhappy because I use the words that support that, it will send you that, not out of being meanness. It's just that they're saying you use it a lot, so you must like that. That's what you're going to get. And as hard as it can be to say, I have abundance, when you're very deep in the in loss, you do have abundance. So the more you see yourself as having abundance and stating that, the abundance comes. And I'm not always talking money, as I'm sure you understand. I'm talking about happiness, joy. The people in your life who will make you feel better suddenly appear because you are expecting them to. It took me a while to be able to follow my own good advice about allowing. And there's two types. There is allowing yourself, and then there's allowing of someone else. I always allow myself first because we are an emotional human being, and when we respond to something that's coming at us or, towards us emotionally, we respond to that. We're a human vessel. It happens. So I allow, first of all, that I may not always respond emotionally like I'd like, but I go ahead and say, that's what it is. I'm all set. I'm going to let that go. The other one is more difficult as well, and that would be allowing of someone else. And that is when you recognize through your very deliberate action that everyone's given right to have a thought and opinion that's different from yours. And when they come at you For instance, I will give you a perfect example. I had early in the weeks after Drew passed, many of his friends, were still around us, and I had one of his dearest friends come up to me and say, well, Drew was a coward.
Wow, that's
and
awful.
Very difficult. And I was really trying to allow at this point. And I looked at him and I said, you are entitled to believe that. But from my perspective, he was one of the bravest people I will ever know, because he spent so much time hiding his pain. And that to me was an extremely brave human being. I, to this day, can still have a conversation with that same person, because it does not help me to judge them and really create a barrier to anybody who disagrees with me. So the allowing of yourself first, because my first reaction was, of course, I wanted to throw this young man off of a cliff. But the second thing was, this is how he sees it. This is not my belief system. This is not how I have to see it. But I can't judge him because he's not looking at it in the way that I believe he should. So I have to allow that he does that. That is very, very hard.
As always, Heidi and I want to say to you that if you've lost hope, please visit us at Open to Hope and lean on our hope until you find your own. And God bless.
You've been listening to Open to Hope Radio, hosted by Doctors Gloria and Heidi Horsley. Like today's edition, all of our past programs are available on demand at opentohope.com, along with helpful articles, videos, resources, and links to help get you through the toughest time of your life. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter and sign up for our monthly newsletter. Again, that's opentohope.com. Check it out today. Then be sure to stop by next Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time, when we'll be posting another edition of Open to Hope Radio. Remember, others have been where you are. They made it through, and you can too, as long as you're open to hope.